Today, we welcome Clayton Crosley, a friend, a mentor, and a top instructor at Long White Cloud Qigong, where Jennifer and I both trained. Clayton is a U.S. Army veteran who's been instrumental in raising awareness of Qigong to the veterans community. Welcome, Clayton. We're so happy and so honored for you that you're here with us today.
Thank you for inviting me.
You're welcome. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and let our audience know a little bit more about you?
Professionally, personally?
Professionally, yeah.
All right.
Well, you can do personal and professional.
Well, no. I have. So I've been teaching Qigong for just a little over 8 years. I was first introduced to it through my martial arts practice, probably over 30 plus years ago. But at the time, I wasn't really that interested in sort of the internal component of things. I was more about kind of the cool moves because, you watch like Kung Fu movies, hey, that looks really cool. But I was aware of it. And I came to Qigong as a result of an injury. I had a background in Tai Chi, and I had a shoulder surgery. And I was looking to speed up the recovery process because the VA told me it was going to take about a year for my torn labrum to heal. So I was looking at Tai Chi videos and stuff on YouTube, and I came across this guy with a funny accent and no hair just doing the joint rotations. And that was John Monroe, the founder of Long White Cloud Qigong. And John I reached out to him over the internet. He very graciously let me take all of his courses that he had at the time. It was in a different format than they are now. And he did it on a give freely but receive freely basis, which was useful for me at the time because I didn't have tremendous financial resources. And so that's kind of how I got my start. And since that time, I could not have imagined where this has led me to now. So it's just been a really great experience.
And where are you at professionally right now? Because I mean, I know the answer, but if you could just tell a little bit about that aspect of it as well.
So professionally, I should probably start in the beginning. So once I completed my certification, John challenged me to ask me what I was going to do with it. And I hadn't thought that far ahead. I really hadn't. And it just so kind of as things come together at the right time, I saw that the VA in Charleston had a flyer for Tai Chi classes. So I thought, well, you know what? I'll volunteer. I'll see if I can volunteer at the VA and teach Qigong. The only problem is no one knew what Qigong was. So I approached them, letting them think that I was teaching Tai Chi because they understood that. It's like, people know what yoga is, right? So, but there's just not like the name recognition. And I started teaching in Savannah and on Mondays and in Hinesville on Thursdays. And the class just grew from there. And I remember teaching my first class, and I remember thinking, I don't think I know enough to last an hour, and I was petrified. And I realized that I did way more than I realized. It was just kind of a matter of being able to present it coherently and to get through it. But so that led from almost 2,000 hours of volunteer service that I've done for the VA. So I'm almost halfway to my Presidential Lifetime Achievement Award. So I'll be somewhere close to 65, I think, by the time I get there. But when COVID came around, I pivoted to an online platform, and then that led to a telehealth program through a network manager, and I became a VA community care network provider, providing services to veterans, which was great because, number one, there was some financial compensation that came along with that, because as a volunteer at the VA, you're actually considered an employee, that's your actual classification, but you're an uncompensated employee. So I thought, hey, great, I'll, maybe finally earn a little bit of money from it. And that then led to what's now the largest Tai Chi program in the nation of any VA. So, and I was asked to become a board member of the National Qigong Association. I currently stepped into the role as vice president, and hopefully, if things go right, I will succeed the current president because he's been there quite a long time and deserves a break. So maybe sometime later this year, I might actually be the president of the National Qigong Association.
That's fantastic. That was well said, and thank you for that. So Jennifer and I have been talking about Qigong since the beginning of our podcast. We mention it probably in every podcast. And from your perspective, I know there are a lot of new listeners out there, hopefully, or maybe people that have listened but don't know really about Qigong. And you mentioned that it's very similar to Tai Chi, or people associate it to Tai Chi. Can you let us know in your words how you would describe Qigong to someone who is new and doesn't know what Qigong is?
Qigong, I would kind of classify as one of the three pillars of traditional Chinese medicine. It's one of the oldest, written records of exercise that dealt with health and vitality. Qi obviously translates to energy, and Gong meaning work or skill. And another widely accepted translation is Qi means, because the symbol for Qi is actually a grain of rice, which represents life, with steam coming up of it. So life and energy. So that's just kind of the translation of the word itself. I would describe Qigong as a mindfulness-based practice that involves movement and stillness, and works with the internal energy that we're all born with and just maybe not necessarily aware of. And for me, it's just led to greater vitality, more energy, and overall better health.
I agree with you when you say greater vitality, because one of the things that I always like to tell people when I explain Qigong is that it's almost like a fountain of youth, where greater vitality equals greater energy, or you just feel better and feel, I guess I'd like to say, younger overall. So, yeah, so that was really a great way of describing it. And you mentioned that it's a movement and stillness. What are you? Can you give us an example of each one? Or
Yeah, so when most people kind of see Qigong, they see people, moving their arms in various patterns, whether it's, bringing your arms up and down and synchronizing the breath with it. But there's, that's a very active form of it. And there's also Qigong that's just holding static postures. And if you think of that, and maybe like you look at a tree, when you look at a tree, you kind of look at it, it doesn't look like a whole lot's going on. You look at the trunk, there's roots going into the ground where it's getting nutrients from, the branches are bringing in some energy from the leaves through photosynthesis. Then there's the part that we can't see. We can't see those nutrients rising up into the tree, which give it itself its vitality. We don't see the sap rising and falling in the tree. And as we hold these static postures, and I kind of liken it to that, a natural aspect, because we can kind of all see that, that even when we're standing still and we're not, there's not much external movement, there's still a lot of internal movement. And being able to connect internally, where you might be holding excess tension, or where you might have an injury or something, and you can kind of tune into that on a deeper level, allows you to be more connected personally and more aware.
That's really yeah, I like that. It's I was thinking about this earlier today, is that probably for me, one of the hardest postures to really like find mastery in for me is just Wuji stance. Out of all the postures we do, inner fire, all the crazy animal plan stuff, sometimes it's just standing there in that posture sometimes that I'm like, oh, how long can I hold this? So I mean, it can be like just doing the standing meditation like that. It can be very challenging for sure. Yeah.
I find it to be the most challenging for me personally, because I'm a very kind of active person externally, teaching a lot. So for me to kind of, if you will, tone that piece down and then take the time just to tune in internally, it's been a process. It wasn't something that I was very good at initially, because I had to learn to turn my brain off. I mean, I've got random thoughts that are like Fred Flintstone to, did you pick up the poop in the yard for the corgis? And as I'm standing there, and the only way I could kind of quiet my mind, and if I can't quiet my mind, I can't really kind of observe what's going on internally, was to literally just count my breath, the entire time. And that kind of allowed me to, if you will, tune out all those external random thoughts that are maybe only good on Jeopardy, to being able to look more internally and kind of be more, have a greater sense of self-assessment, and where I kind of wanted to move the practice to. But it took a lot of work. Was not natural, I will say that.
I hear you on that one. I hear you on that one. Okay, so we're very interested in speaking more about kind of the veteran community.
Yeah.
And the work with the VA. I like to bring awareness to this, and to all of our listeners that do have a connection with the VA. I would like them to know that these resources are available to them as well. So maybe we can add in our show notes later on ways that people can connect with that or find services.
Yeah,
okay.
Absolutely.
So I, doing a little research with Qigong and its work with the veteran community, it really brought up a lot of really interesting things. And then we had brainstormed it prior to the podcast. And one thing that really stood out for me, because I've been doing a little mini course about medical Qigong and just the energetic qualities of the organs. And it's really like, kind of modern medicine focuses on the functions of our organs, whereas like TCM and stuff focuses on more of those energetic qualities. So you had brought up when I was talking about fear, worry, anxiety, guilt, grief, sadness, and anger, and all that kind of stuff. And you had mentioned about yang energy, the kidneys, and the imbalance between the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. And I thought maybe if you felt comfortable expanding on that, because I would love to hear more. And I think that would help our listeners, even other people that have dealt with maybe trauma or just like a long periods of stress, just constant stress.
Yeah. So when, we know that the kidneys have a strong relationship to the sympathetic nervous system, specifically because they're on each side of the spine, and the adrenal glands that's right on top of them. The training that the people in the military go to is highly stressful. And I mean, they're teaching you how to kill people and then also do a job on top of it. So what they really do is they almost disengage that rest and digest portion of the parasympathetic nervous system by elevating the qualities of the sympathetic nervous system. And so we see that, and don't get me wrong, that's really, really useful for the roles that these people are doing, because they need to be super aware. They need to have an abundance of energy. They need to be hyper vigilant to remain safe and secure and accomplish these things that we ask them to do that are super hard. Now, on the flip side of that, that's good for a certain period of time. It's not always useful to have that indefinitely. So as people transition into civilian life, they've still got this massive spike of that very active energy. and they're not doing those sorts of really complicated and dangerous tasks that they've done before. So what happens is that it creates an imbalance in them, and we see this, and I mean, obviously PTSD has to do with specific experiences as well, but we just have an elevation of that specific energy. And what I've been able to see through them embracing Qigong and stuff is that this comes more back into balance, to where they're able to kind of access the parasympathetic nervous system, that rest and digest. They don't always have to be hyper vigilant about every single thing. You know, I remember one of my veterans, and he lived out in the country. He hated going out in public, and after about a year, he told me, he goes, you know what? I went into Walmart. Usually he would go to Walmart right when they opened, when no one was there. And he said, I went into Walmart and I didn't go right when they opened. And he essentially said, basically, I didn't freak out when I was in there. I wasn't, you know, super agitated, or my energy and anxiety weren't elevated. And that was a huge thing for him, because he had been that way for so long. It was almost like it was the only thing that he had known.
Clayton, I know that you've worked with a lot of people who've experienced a lot of different struggles, injuries, whether they're neurological or physical. Do you have, can you share some stories of some of the ways that Qigong, through your teaching or Qigong in general, has helped certain people? Maybe give us an example of one that's physical, maybe more that's one neurological, or depression or some kind of disease.
Yeah, so recently, what the great thing is that you never know what it is for the veterans that's like kind of their milestone. So for one guy, it was actually just being able to touch his toes. It was pretty simple. And because he didn't have that flexibility anymore, he hadn't exercised in a long time, and that was his milestone. And for another veteran, it was that he felt that he had excessive weakness in his legs. So we focused a lot on kidneys, because the kidneys are responsible for the strength in the legs. And his was that he just wanted to be able to get on his Harley Davidson and go for a ride. And about a year and a half later, he goes, you know, he sent me a text. He's like, hey, guess what I did today? I went on a 30-mile ride on my bike. And then some more kind of, I won't call them extreme, but I'll call them more challenging cases. There was a person who started out in a wheelchair, and we just started doing stuff seated. And gradually we started to getting to stand up. And so we do part of it seated, part of it standing. And he went from a wheelchair to a rollator to being completely ambulatory over the course of about 3 years. And actually, he even produced a video, and he's a super great guy. He's got one of the best smiles you'll ever see. And he tells everyone, you know, the Qigong, and he likes it because it also complements his acupuncture treatment as well. And he finds that when he does the Qigong, that it extends the life of his acupuncture treatment a little bit more. So he even gets an additional, if you will, benefit from it, as with an additional modality attached to it. And then just seeing people, one of the veterans had lost his wife unexpectedly recently, and he had been quite withdrawn. And he was actually an employee at the VA. And I've got the honor of actually watching him blossom and go from being quite withdrawn and not being very active to where he just took a trip for like 3 months to Europe, and he's, you know, just started seeing a lady that he has an interest in, and he couldn't see himself there 3 years before that. You know, the grief was so overwhelming for him, and it's just such a privilege to really kind of be able to be a part of that. I really, almost makes me start to well up in the eye. Well, it does make me well up in the eyes. I can start to feel the water kind of go behind the eyes. But it's just a really great thing to witness.
Yeah, I can't imagine how I can't imagine it, how rewarding it must be as you're telling me these stories. And these are pretty big milestones that or achievements that these people got to, and it didn't happen overnight, right? So it takes time. So, and I know we're all probably like, you want to go ahead, want to say something, Clayton, about that? Because
Yeah, right from the very beginning, I tell them that, there's some immediate things that they can start to expect, which is kind of an improvement in range of motion. And once we kind of get them to breathe the way that we want them to breathe, they can probably expect to start to be able to fall asleep faster, stay asleep longer, because they're able to access that parasympathetic state much faster. And then for, other more complex issues, I let them know that this is incremental and that all these small little improvements yield this huge result. And we may not see that result right away because it is incremental, but I try to give them reasonable expectations from the very beginning. And I think that that's really important, because if I could just get them to come to a couple of classes and they would be all, fixed or better, that would be great. But that's not the way it works. I remember one of the concepts that John always emphasizes with me when we talk frequently is to chop wood and carry water, and to just continue doing it, to just do those basic things that are helping to sustain you or make you feel better, and just to continue to do it. And that's really where the gong comes from, because the gong is work or skill, right? Well, we don't just develop that. Anyone who plays a musical instrument, they didn't just, get that skill over, I don't know, a week or a few lessons or whatever. It's something that's achieved over a long period of time.
and I also know that from practicing qigong myself, you can have benefits that are immediate or from a few practices, just knowing or being more aware of your energy, feeling more energetic, feeling better, utilizing some of the breath work techniques, and there are many. I know personally that I've sensed a lot of shifts in my energy with the practice as well, and not just physically but also mentally and emotionally. And I think that's important as well, that people should be aware that that's a huge aspect of it.
Yeah, I emphasize a lot intention and attention with them as well, which is, if we don't pay attention to it and set our focus on it, well, then we're probably not going to see the benefit. And often I'll have people who are quite rigid about learning the movements just perfectly. And I say that I think that the more important component is the intention, the fact that you're setting aside that time of self-care for yourself, the fact that you've shown up and you're kind of, giving yourself this gift of just showing up and being present and doing the practice, and that the intention, to me, in many respects, maybe outweighs the getting the movements just right. And I think that that's an important thing, because when it's like anything that we do, intention matters. But I don't know that they often see themselves as, I wouldn't say undeserving, but I will say that they don't know that this is available to them. That maybe that's a better description.
Well, it's that expression, the chi follows the yi.
Where the mind goes, the chi flows.
Yep. Yeah. That's well said. And you were talking about too, people fixing themselves. And in our last episode, I did bring up the chop wood, carry water, and I mentioned you on that. Yeah. And we also had John Monroe on a podcast interview as well previously. So listeners, if you want to hear John in person, you can listen to that episode. But we were talking about in our last episode as well is using Qigong to help like prevention and self-management of diseases, because when I'm at When I was on base, actually, like, in the exchange, and you'll see the pharmacy line with just loads, just long lines and stuff like that. And I keep thinking, like, I would love to see people. I'm not saying disregard everything, still work with your doctor and stuff like that, but there maybe are some things that we can do with Qigong to help ourselves and maybe become less dependent on pharmaceuticals in certain situations.
And I would say that things are going in that direction. I mean, the VA is the largest health organization on the entire planet. The
That's
budget for
crazy.
the VA exceeds the budget of all armed forces combined annually. And so we're starting to see this push for complementary integrative health. And it's not that they're doing away with the Western medicine side of things, but they see this as a way to an adjunct to it. So this is something we can add to it that they can also get benefit from. But what I like about this is it takes it from a reactive sort of form of healthcare to a proactive sort of form of healthcare, because reactive is when we get sick, then we go and we see the doctor and we get some medicine or we get a surgery, right? That's reactive. This is, hey, go do some Qigong. It's helping you move better. It's helping you improve your balance. It's giving you some peace of mind. That's proactive. And I think that what they say, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Isn't that the same? But that's kind of what we're looking at.
Yeah, you mentioned before that it complements one of your clients was taking or having acupuncture done, and Qigong complemented it, and which helped in the healing process, probably a little faster. Or even if it didn't, it just is a way to complement any other type of practice. And you also mentioned in the VA, in this complementary integrative health services, you have Qigong, there's Tai Chi, there's acupuncture, therapeutic massage, meditation, and Reiki, just to name a few. So it's a broad, right? You have a lot of tools there.
Native American healing, biofeedback, and there's another one that's escaping my brain at the moment. But yeah, they're just, it's just great to kind of see this. And what I think is going to be wonderful about this is once the largest healthcare organization in the world starts to get on board with this, other organizations will follow suit. So we'll start to maybe see your private insurance company through your husband's employer or your spouse's employer, and wellness programs starting to come up. I mean, you kind of saw a little bit of that, but there's more towards Western exercise, so like silver sneakers type programs and things like that. Not necessarily towards complementary integrative health of chiropractic and acupuncture and qigong and things. But I think that what we're going to see is a nice partnership between traditional Chinese medicine or classical Chinese medicine, however you want to define that, and Western medicine, because they can certainly support each other.
And as far as I'm concerned, it's taking way too long for that to happen, right? I mean, this has been around. Qigong has been around for thousands of years, and so all of these other modalities that you mentioned have as well. And years ago, yoga was creeping in there, and you couldn't find a yoga class anywhere. And then the next thing you know, it's a booming business, which is wonderful, and more people doing that. But I think personally, I because Jennifer and I both teach yoga and our yoga instructors, I feel that Qigong is more accessible, and your age range is broader. Anybody can do it. Anybody can do yoga as well, even in a chair. But I find it more accessible. And I like what you said before, is that you set the expectation or the intention. You don't have to get it right. And that's what I tell people. Don't worry about if you don't get my arm movements right. Just feel and go and be aware and start that process, and you'll get it. And I think that's why I like Qigong. And we want to make it more people aware of what it is.
Yeah. So the veterans are kind of a hard group, and they look at things like this as being, I wouldn't say less masculine, but kind of woo-woo. And then, so when I started to explain Qigong, because when you talk about energy in a broad concept, you're like, But then I explain it to them on a way that they can relate to. And this is something that I think they appreciate, which is I start with, your body gives off a thermal image, because if it didn't, the Defense Department wouldn't spend billions of dollars every year on night vision devices so we can see you at night. And then they go, okay, okay. And then I go, well, your nervous system is run by electricity. And they're like, yeah. And then you go, well, the byproduct of an electrical current is a magnetic field, or the voice creating sound. And you liken that to an F-16 breaking the sound barrier, or vibration. We know that vibration and frequency are also, because because when you leave a rock concert, if you've been too close to the speakers, your ears are ringing, because that frequency is still vibrating in that resonance, even though the music stopped. And the fluids moving around in the body, it's a form of hydro and hydraulics, and it's no different than water and current, and we can see these things. But then it's a little less, I won't say scary, it's a little more digestible, I guess would be the word that I use, because they know all of these things. They just haven't really kind of looked at them through that lens. And then when they feel better, and they're like, oh, I can feel tingling in my hands, or my hands are warm, or we might massage the lung point and the shoulder well, and they're like, my whole arm feels like this cooling, warming sensation. And then they can really connect to it. And I think that's important. So it really doesn't help to show them if they can't connect to it. So I'm always trying to get them to connect to the practice, and I think that's a way that gets them to connect to it.
And sometimes I wonder because, I'll speculate on things or just think deeply on them. And one thing I notice is that, when people are in the military, they're really good at compartmentalizing things, right? They're really good at, okay, this is the situation, this is what I need to do. And then it's put in that compartment. I wonder if there is maybe a concern or a worry or anxiety around pulling things out of those compartments, those emotions, those energies. Do you think that's far-fetched, or do you find that to be?
Emotions aren't really part of your training in the service. You
Yeah.
you learn to push those things down, and then the further that you get away from them and experience them, then the more uncomfortable they start to feel, because you haven't experienced them in a while. I mean, I would say everyone is probably keeps the love of their family and things like that, but how they as an individual feel isn't something that's easy to share. Some of the veterans, when we talk about anxiety, guilt, grief, and sadness, and some of them, most people don't really talk about like the really difficult things that they encounter during service. But then there are sometimes something comes up, and then just out of nowhere, they'll share something with me. And I'll be like, that's really horrific, man. I'm sorry you went through that, and I'm glad you're here, and I really appreciate you sharing that with me. But then those things kind of come up, and then they seem to be able to work through them, and work through them a little bit easier, because they've been kind of, as you say, compartmentalized or dormant. And we all used to always joke that, yeah, we just put stuff in boxes, and originally we just had a closet without a light into it, and we just put things up there, and then we needed a mini storage, and then now we need a whole warehouse. It looks like the X-Files as you're walking through, with rows of things. So
Yeah, and I think like some people don't realize too, it's like you're moving every few years. You really are not very connected to your family really anymore. A lot of times what I see is even family doesn't really make the time to come see you either. You're kind of like in that on that journey almost alone, except for like if you're married and have
yeah,
children and they move place to place with you. But even your connection with your family gets really reduced. It's difficult to see them
yeah,
when you want to, and stuff like that as well. And that's another aspect of it.
Yeah, I mean, you're a bit of a nomad. I mean, being a warrior is a very solitary existence in many respects. The family that they connect to is the people they serve with, and I think that maybe that's one of the best things that I've gotten to witness is when you get out of service, you kind of lose that camaraderie, that esprit de corps, that spirit of the group, because you guys don't all have a common mission anymore, whether it's, making sure that the maintenance on aircraft is perfect so no one gets injured when they're flying, or if it's, taking an actual, you know, physical objective of like taking a mountain or a hill or a building and setting it up to be a safe, secure perimeter. What I get to witness though is that they get to reconnect, and it doesn't matter, they don't have to be from the same service, but when they come to Qigong, they're all there for the same purpose. There's that, if you will, that esprit de corps is reignited. And there's an unspoken bond between all the veterans. Everyone's gone through the training's all a little bit different, but if you can just say the core of it, the main ingredient is pretty similar in every branch. And so there's an unspoken respect that's already exists. And when they get that group together and they get to reform, if you will, those connections that were severed when they left service. And it's a beautiful thing to see, because I think that the healing, the social component of the groups, I think might outweigh the Qigong that I do with them, because there's just, it's something that they haven't had in a while. And I think it plays a large component in therapeutically.
Yeah, I can
Absolutely.
agree.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree as well. You create a tribe of people. It's a social gathering, and that is one of the things people need, that connection in order to thrive and live a healthy life. So it's fantastic. Yeah.
And through my journey of Qigong, I've just loved everybody that I've met, the instructors, the fellow people and stuff. There's just something, it brings forth a very nice, loving kindness from people. And I really appreciate that.
I think that it makes people think more about service outside of themselves, because you start to benefit from, like, how can I get someone else to, see what I'm seeing or experience what I'm experiencing, because I know it'll help them. And so there's, I think, this natural, if you will, sprout, like something grows inside of you and it sprouts out of you. And I think a large component of that is service.
Love that. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm starting to think of ways as I'm hearing you, like, because I don't belong to the Veterans Association or anything like that, but like, where can I go in and introduce Qigong and make it a tool that people can use to help with their healing? So I'm starting to brainstorm in my head, to think about places I can pop into here, like, medical communities, right?
Yeah, so I would, anyone who has it's like, well, how do I get started? The easiest place to get started is by going to the VA and offering to be a volunteer.
Mm.
Another great avenue are the veteran service organizations, because American Legions, VFW posts, they already have a space, and you're going to, maybe you can offer a series of classes free, or even for a small fee. And they're always open to, if it's good for the veterans, and being really supportive of that. So there's a lot of opportunities out there. There's a lot of other great organizations like Red, White, and Blue, the Semper Fi Odyssey, Wounded Warrior. Even there's just so many nonprofits and veteran service organizations that are out there. And there's one that I think often gets overlooked, and they're under the umbrella of the VA, and they were started after Vietnam War, and it's called the Veterans Readjustment Counseling Center, and for short, they're just known as the Vet Center. And so there's a lot of social work that goes on there, and some of them, like the one here in Savannah, they have a model club, and the guys come together and they put together models, and that's one of the activities they do. So there's, all these different ways of reaching out and to be of service. If people, have any interest in doing so.
Yeah, so you're creating that community, like you were
Yeah.
saying. Yeah, I love that. So, did you have any other questions, Rose? Because I was gonna have Clayton tell all of our friends how they can get connected if they are interested in classes through the VA.
No, the last thing I wanted to ask from
Yeah.
your perception or perspective, Clayton, is men, women. Like I know from yoga, being a yoga instructor, I don't see as many men, right? So you see a lot of women in class, and
Right.
maybe a guy will show up if it's a good stretch class or something like that. I kind of get the feeling that with qigong, you'll start to see or are seeing more men, and maybe because where you are working or operating, there are more men. So if you can just give us an idea of
Yeah. Well, I mean, demographically, I think women are about 22% of service members. So, so obviously there's a big imbalance there because more men generally serve. But there are, there's, so I have some women's groups, and some of these they have some. I've done some stuff for the VA specifically for some military sexual trauma groups, working with them as a volunteer, and some of the mental health clinics. And but there are more men, and what's kind of cool is that you would think there would be more women that stick with it. I actually see most of the women do stick with it, but I see a large portion of the men that stay with it. Which I don't know, like if you go into a drop-in yoga class, like you said, you might see one or two guys there, not many. But I mean, you guys have been to my Zoom classes and stuff. There's a good mix, and you see the same people almost every week. So they wouldn't keep coming if something wasn't working for them. They would find something else to do with their time, because I mean, time is a very valuable commodity, if not our most valuable commodity. And so I think that it's great. And the women's population, especially here in the Southeast, is the largest growing veterans population in the VA is the female population currently. And it's going to continue that trend. They do all these forecasting, and this looks like this is going to, it's not something, it's just like a blip where it spikes up. It's going to just continue to grow exponentially in an upward direction.
And I am glad that you mentioned that there are a lot more men, only because I think sometimes people are reluctant to try something new, and I'm not judging or labeling, but men may feel that they need to do something a little differently in order to get their energy out or exercise. But qigong is a wonderful form of exercise as well, and it's helped them. So I guess I was kind of looking for that answer because
Yeah.
it should appeal to everybody, not just
Right.
a certain group of people. So it's nice to see that more men are coming out as well. And I know I've been part of your classes, and there's people of all ages, which is fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
I know how you can rope them in more. Just tell them it's a martial art. It's a
Right.
form of martial art.
I may or may not have done that on occasion. I cannot confirm nor deny.
I know.
But I do explain to it, because when we look at the origins of Qigong, there is Qigong that is completely martial, like John's Inner Fire Course is very martial. But when we look at the origins of Qigong, often the person in the village, well, I'll go back, way back in my time machine, but often the person who was the defender of the village, who was quite skilled in martial arts, was also the healer of the village, because they had to heal themselves. So I like to tell them that this is really just an extension of their warrior status. They're just a peaceful warrior that's more focused on healing rather than the other. So, because I mean, they dovetail into each other.
Well, yeah. I mean, there is a specific segment of Qigong that's a martial arts Qigong. And then
Yeah.
and then there's the healer's path and inner alchemy and all that stuff. So yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So how do people connect with doing this program in the VA?
So the first step is to go to their primary care provider and ask for the service. That's where it starts. The veteran needs to ask for the service because not every VA even realizes that this is a service that they have to offer. If any veteran is unsure on how to ask, I'm quite happy. You can share my details in your show notes, but they can go in and they can ask. And some VAs have internal programs already established, which is fantastic. Some VAs have volunteer programs. Some VAs are using the community care network. And all of these are wonderful resources for them, and they can do it. And any veteran can always come to my classes on Zoom, 9 a.m. and Mondays and Thursdays, Eastern time. And I can't remember the last time I had to cancel a class. That's one of the things I try, because generally speaking, I don't feel bad. I'm not sick. I don't really have any illnesses or anything. And I attribute all of that longevity to the Qigong practice. So they can always come Mondays and Thursdays at 9:00. And again, they can contact me for a link. I don't want someone Zoom bombing me. So I've been lucky to avoid that so far. I'd like to continue that record currently. So and just if they're unsure, I would also recommend that they go to Long White Cloud Qigong and look at the list of instructors. I can get almost, I feel like I can competently say that if they approach one of the instructors in John's group, that they would be taken care of.
That
I
includes
agree.
that
I
includes
agree.
us.
Yep, that includes all of
That
us.
does
Yep.
include you.
Yeah.
That does.
Yeah, we'll put all that contact info in the show notes without the Zoom link, of course. And that would be really helpful. I think there are probably a lot of people out there that are not aware of these type of benefits that they can get through you or the Veterans Association. So this is so valuable. So yeah.
Yeah, and the VA is using this for some really serious stuff: chronic pain, movement issues, balance issues, hypertension. Veteran just recently said that for the first time in years, he got his test results back and his kidney functions were finally normal again. And he says the only thing that he's done differently is he comes to class twice a week. So, we see all these. And what's nice, I think, about that is there's an actual test that says, hey, something's improved for you. Here's your number. And they go, well, why is that number better? And then they go, well, the only thing I've changed is I'm incorporating some Qigong. So there is the proof in the pudding there. The results are there. So that's really good. And, even at the end of classes, so I teach for the Western New York VA healthcare system through telehealth. And we ask them in the beginning of every class what their pain level is and what their stress level is. And at the end of class, we ask them the same question on the scale. And almost always, I don't think I've yet to see a reduction. The pain may stay close to the same, but every single person says that they feel less stress and they feel better at the end of the class. So if you're feeling stressed out, Qigong.
Qigong for everything.
That's
That's right.
Yeah.
I love it.
I
Yeah.
was going to say that we can't thank you enough, Clayton, for really taking the time. I know you're busy. You have a busy schedule. For being here with us, for sharing your experiences, your wisdom, your vision for Qigong, for everyone, and particularly the veterans. So we really hope that there are listeners out there that are listening to this that may not be veterans, that know someone who is, and that they will either say, hey, listen to this podcast and connect with, Clayton or somebody that can help you. And don't be reluctant at anyone out there to step forward and say, I want to try it, because that's the first step in healing. So we can't stress that enough.
One of the things is that often a suggestion from a fellow veteran actually has more impact on their decision than the suggestions that they receive from their actual physician. Because they're like, oh, well, he's a veteran like me, and this is working for him. So it's not like you're being, I won't say dictated to, but you're not kind of being, there's a connection that they can immediately have. So, yeah.
Yeah. And thank you, Clayton, for everything that you've done. And it's been, I know, a big commitment for you, but this has been your path for a long time. And so we are grateful for you.
It has just 2,000 more hours. I'm going to get that letter from
go.
Preston. I'm looking forward to it.
And I know you
Kim
will get
Kardashian is probably going to be president at that time, the way things are going.
Yeah, and also people can check out the National Qigong Association as well, and we'll put that link in the notes too. If you guys want to support a local organization, well, to the United States anyways. So it's a great organization.
Yes.
Yeah. And we invite our listeners, if you have any questions or anything else that you need clarification on, please just email us directly. We'll have those links in the show notes as well. So yes. So thank you so much, Clayton, for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
See you guys soon.
Yeah.